Unfortunately, I'm stuck with a disclaimer here at the beginning of this that anything I say is simply my opinion alone. Since working for DoD, it's important for me to convey that nothing I say represents official policy or position of the U.S. Department of Defense or the U.S. government. And when I say that, I get a very odd reaction from a lot of people at this conference who immediately wonder, what on earth is the Department of Defense doing at a climate, mind, and behavior symposium? And, I often wonder the same thing. I feel that I'm something of a statistical outlier here, surrounded by academics, scientists, environmentalists, economists, and me trying to muddle my way through these important topics. But there is an answer to the question, and the answer is that the issues that we're discussing here, they're global issues, and they affect everyone, and that includes militaries, and it certainly includes the Department of Defense, not just for energy implications, but for national security reasons as well. And the second caveat of that, too, is why it matters to National Defense University, the specific organization I work for, which is the other question I've gotten a lot, is what is National Defense University? And the university title throws people off. In essence, we're senior policy, education, and research arm reporting to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And our mission is that we're charged with problem solving of not finite issues, but of large national security strategic problems that the nation faces. And obviously energy and climate issues fit very well into this dichotomy. And we engage in what I like to call policy-based academics. We have one foot in each world, which is great. You get the intelligence of the academics with the relevance of the policymakers, and you really have an ability to do work that has very, very real outcomes that matter in the real world. So, it's funny, usually when we do talks like this, I'm trying to explain why behavior is important to the military, and in this environment, I find it's necessary to do it the other way around, that is, explain the military to the behavior people. And the starting point for that conversation is, why is DoD concerned with energy and climate issues? And I'll give you very short answers, and that are not quite satisfactory, but for the climate issue, which for the record does not get as much attention as it should, it's issues of force posture and structure. If we have sea level rise, if we have dry areas getting drier, how does it affect where we can deploy our assets around the world? And on the energy side, the Department of Defense is the biggest consumer of energy in the United States. 2% of total U.S. energy consumption is done by the Department of Defense at a cost of $17 billion a year. And when we find ourselves in wars, it carries an enormous toll in human life as well, in terms of forward operating areas where 70% of the military logistics burden is fuel and water. So finding ways to reduce consumption is incredibly important from a security perspective as well. So it's really important to really fundamentally change our thoughts about how we approach these conventionally liberal, if you will, issues. And I also say there's nothing more powerful than four-star members of the military screaming about renewable energy technologies. It's really quite a powerful statement. So the really central question that that we have to address here today is can the Department of Defense be an effective change vehicle on energy and climate issues? And if so, what are the implications, not just for the Department of Defense, but for society at large? Because that's what we're really concerned with here. We're not concerned with specific outcomes for institutions. We're concerned with affecting global change. And what's really trying to answer that question here, rather, I'll try to answer that question, and then you can hopefully tell me what's wrong about it, because you're the experts in the field here. And so what do we know? Well, we know that culture, by definition, is something that doesn't change. It's the definition of culture as preserving values against change. So you immediately run into this roadblock of how do you tackle these really fundamental issues? But we also know that DoD is very good at creating its own cultural mindsets through boot camp, through training and education programs. The pessimistic way to say it is brainwashing, but I prefer training and education. And they're very good. They're very, very good at this, much better than society at large. And the second piece I have working in their favor is the leadership mentality and the command hierarchy that really gives you an ability to affect change at a level that you just don't see across the rest of society. Now, even more importantly, and this is kind of the central tenet of what I'm here to talk about today, is how does DoD affect change? And it comes through what I like to call the Department of Defense's first mover principle. And if you look at technology, it comes up on the technology side. quite a bit. You see it with commercial nuclear power, with microchips, especially with the internet, microwaves. The list goes on. And how do they do it? Well, they do it because DoD is in a very unique position here, where it's the only organization that has the size, the capital, and the non-economic incentives to really enable a lot of these technologies before they hit an economies of scale point in the market to become commercially viable technologies. And DoD can finance this because they don't have to be necessarily concerned about profit. They're concerned with mission effectiveness. And because of that, it puts them in a good position to really try to spearhead technology-based efforts. But is the same true of behavior and culture and the soft sciences? And the jury's out. There's not hard data on it. My opinion, of course, is yes, it does. And if you look back through history, you see that DoD has done this very effectively in the past as well. The personal hygiene culture, spearheaded by the military in the early 1900s. I mean, it's an operational vulnerability when you have tens of thousands of troops sick and dying from disease and poor hygiene. Desegregation of the armed forces post-World War II, very arguably, a predecessor of a very larger shift across the American public. And, you can go on with other issues as well. Those are the two biggest ones. So, now that we have that framework, let's step back and try to look at this idealistically for a minute and think about the potential societal implications of what I'll call DoD's soft power capabilities. And keep in mind this point too. If you look at polls annually of the most trusted institutions in the United States, year in and year out, the United States military is on top by enormous double-digit percentages, way above obviously any other element of government, but also significantly above, faith-based organizations, charities, so on and so forth. You're looking at 80% plus trust that American people have in the military, even when wars are unpopular. And it's something we really need to tap into here. Secondly, they're far ahead of U.S. society at large in terms of energy reduction efforts on domestic installations over the last decade. They've cut consumption by about 10 to 12%, which I don't think you could find anyone else in the U.S. who has really managed such a feat. And the most crucial point here is the education piece. Every year, DoD educates hundreds of thousands of people into the military, and similarly, every year, hundreds of thousands leave the military and they return to civilian life. And this is where we really find out how DoD can impact society and its work on this front. And it's when troops leave. It's not when they're in the military. It's when they leave and they go back to civilian life and they settle down in communities and they take with them their values and their cultures that they get in the military. And they essentially become seeds that are planted in their communities, spreading their ideologies and values. And let me tell you, nothing against Birkenstock-wearing, tree-hugging hippies, but, everyone expects them to say that you should cut energy consumption. No one expects someone, a clean-cut member of the military to say it. And when they do, it has enormous credibility, and it becomes a very, very powerful message that it conveys. So, ultimately what we see is a situation where DoD is both poised and capable to really take a leading edge on the energy and climate issues and really offer a lot of force and weight to the cause and really be a transformational force in society, not just for its own operational benefit, but for societal benefit at large. And, I had an alarming thought last night during George Marshall's talk when he was talking about how groups like to invent these myth narratives about how their group will, be the hero and save the world. And I thought, oh my God, is that what I've come up with? Is this fancy narrative for how my organization will save the world? And, am I no different than any other organization out there that, similarly thinks that their strategy is the best one? And granted, like all those other people, I believe that my strategy is one that has a lot of potential to succeed. But how do you find out? So the answer is, this is something that we're tackling right now. We've gotten away from, there's been an academic inundation at this conference, which, for me missing grad school, it's been phenomenal. And just in terms of the knowledge, expertise that's here, I know Liz is working with us on the project, Karen Hart-Martinez is working with us on this project because we need the academic experts who can bring, all the research and expertise to really tap into the practical sided projects though. So, the military is not waiting, on this. The Marine Corps mantra is, I'd rather have a 70% solution today than an 100% solution in 10 years. We don't have time to wait on these issues. So, the project we're engaged in now, the Department of the Navy is funding us to actually construct, design, and test a pilot behavioral and cultural change campaign on 2 Navy installations. And the 2 installations are Mayport Naval Station in Florida and Camp Lejeune at the Marine Corps base in North Carolina. And it's really designed, to get hard data. Karen, in her first day plenary, made reference to his housing study at Fort Belvoir that was designed to demonstrate the effectiveness of CCSPF insulation. And I mean, not that insulation is ineffective. It's very effective, but the accidental finding is the enormous role that behavior plays in energy consumption. Efficient technology in the hands of inefficient operators is just worthless. And so what we're after now, though, we're after hard data because, the military exists on hard data. I'm selling you a generator. It'll save you 20% on your energy bills over the next 10 years and use X, Y amount less fuel. They get that. The behavior side is very difficult. It's hard to quantify. There's no absolutes. There's variance, on what base you're at, what service you're in, what type of people you're dealing with. So what we really want to find ultimately is some kind of hard data. And the challenge is that the academic research and all the work so far, it's on the civilian private sector side, and the military world it has its similarities, but it's very different as well. So meshing those two together, and this is where our role comes in. At the end of the day, our organization, we don't make policy, we don't make any technological piece. But what we do very well is socialize ideas, that we have the ability to pull into military services and to pull in the academics and to pull in industry and other government agencies and say, sit here at this table and tell us what works. Information sharing is the biggest enemy of really confronting these issues. And, what we get is you get a dialogue. The subject matter experts who have done all the research will say, you should look at X, Y, and Z. And the military will say, well, let me educate you on how the military works. We can't do X and Z, but why? That's something we can work with here. And you get these dialogues that ultimately will generate, hopefully, a very, very, effective campaign on this side. And the biggest, you face other certain challenges too. Probably the biggest difference is that economic incentives that private side research agrees are a big motivator are worthless in the military. You can't reward people economically. I can't say, if you turn out the lights every day for a week, I'll buy you 3 beers. If you do it for just one day, I'll buy you 1 beer. Skip's method of keeping people's talk short, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the actual military. So how do you find what does? And I wish I had a pretty PowerPoint of our results, but this is a long endeavor. We've been working at this for 1.5 years just to begin to construct the framework for how the study looks. The next 1.5 years will ultimately be the actual study, and the observation will be will be down at these installations in a couple of weeks to really to observe the buildings that were used. The idea is, if we can build a study that can be replicated on these 2 installations. So, what buildings do all bases have in common? Barracks, maintenance facilities, administration buildings, command and control facilities. And we can study them for 1.5 years or so, funding dependent, and then go to Navy with a document that says, listen, here, the data's in, here's what you do. And then you can actually carry this out across the entire military, build it into training and education curricula, and then circle right back to what I said, just a few minutes ago. Socialize those ideas into the mass public. I said we did need to move out right away, but it's still a very, very long process. And nothing I've outlined here is fast, certainly, but as of yet, I haven't seen a better option. And I'm biased, but in my opinion, this is a really fundamental way to, when you talk about not just ideas, but how do you actually put those ideas into practice and make the changes that you need? To me, this is the way. And in the interest of time and my beer, I'm going to end the talk here. And I'm sad this is the last day of the conference because now that I presented, I'd love the chance to talk with you more on your ideas and insights. So I'll leave it with that. But please do give it serious thought and realize that DoD needs as much of a voice at the table as all these other organizations. Thank you very much.